Pablo and Rodrigo, could you start our meeting with a brief overview? What's our problem and mission in creating this trading card site?
Yes. Well, our problem, one of I would like to see it, is that many people have many great things to show, but they don't have like the tool or anything to show it. And so the mission is to create a global database where people can submit their projects as trading cards, and so we can see about their project and about the author, and see many things that we don't know they are yet.
Fantastic. Perfect. Anything you'd like to add to that? That's a great way to state the problem and the mission. Rodrigo, anything to add to that?
Yes, the tools we are using PHPMy Admin and to start the database, and later we will use a server service like FileZilla and HTML and CSS to make it like pretty.
Great. Okay. Good.
And
good.
the things that we can search the cards. Well, we are discussing them, but basically the author name, card subject, popularity, date added. Every card we suggested that we'll have an ID and also every author, so we can identify them easily.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Valuable addition. The problem and the mission followed by our strategy and our tools. Okay. So following up on that, Rodrigo, Brent, maybe you could give an introduction to setting up queries and then writing a short writing the PHP code to generate the HTML.
All right, can do.
Great.
All right, so with the tool PHPMy Admin that you guys mentioned, I use that all the time to generate queries. The way I program isn't remembering like half of what I'm supposed to, but it's about knowing how to find it when I need it, because there's so much stuff you can try and remember. So let me share my screen with you guys. And if I go to PHPMy Admin and I use my super secure username and password, root, and then blank for the password, that's just a joke, never do that. We'll wind up inside my my databases. With that, if I want to get queries to use, a query is basically just taking like a set of tables within a database or a specific table and then filtering out the information based on criteria. So you basically tell it what you want out of it and you tell it the conditions. So like if you're looking for all the artist cards by John specifically, your criteria would be something to the effect of, at the end of it, where artist equals John. And then you can, filter out the other results. So with that, if I click on BIY as a database, and then I go to browse this table, artist trading cards, sheet 1, which is a poor name, but it was just what the CSV was when we were experimenting. You'll see that up top, it has some, I don't want to assume you guys will know it's a query, but this is a query. You see some text here. And this is what PHPMy Admin ran in order to get the results down below. So any action I take from this point forwards, if I click on something, if I update something, if I use the search tool and specify what artist, what category, PHPMy Admin is automatically going to give me this text, this query. And that's going to make it really easy for me to add these into the PHP code to pull data from MySQL. So to kind of show that a little bit better, if I click on search and then I say category jump and I return this, you'll see that at the end, we select and then the asterisk means all. From is going to specify like where the data source is, like what table it's in. So this is artist trading cards. This is the criteria, the filter. And then we, compare what's in this column to the string or the text we want to see if it's in it. If this is true, the result gets returned. If it's not true, it will just get ignored and not added to our data set that we can, then display on the website or something like that. Does that make sense so far?
Pablo Rodrigo?
Yes.
Great. Hi, Paulina, welcome. Fasten your seatbelt, Paulina. We're going pretty fast here. We'll try to fill you in at the end. Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
Actually, the too long didn't read version of that is in PHPMy Admin, if you do anything, it gives you the query you need to use in PHP. And I mean, that's probably the shortest way to say it. You search something, this is the filter that you are using basically. This is the query. Oops. This is the what you add into your code to filter data down like this. And as one last quick example, if I do, artist name John, all results from John show up and we see there's something on the end that specifies that. So it's good to know what this means to understand it, but it's also good to know that you can just kind of run a search and then copy that search from here and use it in your website. Do you guys have any questions on this? Okay, I see Pablo shaking their head no. Okay, we're good. All right, so the next side of this is going to be the using our server, like our web server, right? To like if someone requests a page, we want to be able to have a script that will connect to this database and then grab the data and then display it back as basically HTML. So the way this works is somebody might go to, artistcards.com or buildityourself.com/artistcards. That is going to be a request, and that is going to be loaded in actually a .php file instead of .html. The real difference is PHP can execute server-side code. It can grab things like the time, it could grab the date, it could connect to a database, it can know if you're logged in or not. But what it gives back to the person, so like it's basically the same thing when you request an HTML site, it goes to that whole series, like the old little infographic we showed you guys back in the day. But the difference is when it gets to the server isn't just going to return the file, it's actually going to execute code which generates the HTML file. Then that gets sent back. The code we're going to write right now is basically going to log into our database, run a query like this, pull that data, and then display it with HTML. That's going to get sent back to the user only as HTML. They don't get to see the queries and stuff. So that code, luckily for you guys, we wrote it on Friday, so it's really clean. I found this code, it's still worth mentioning. I think you guys have all been in workshops with me where you ask me a question and I go to Google if I don't know it. Same thing with this code. I just Googled, connect to MySQL database, display records or results in a table. And I got this code. Then I tweaked it for what we're doing. And this is just a basic example. It's not actually the full thing, but so basically here.
Excuse me, Brent. May I interrupt for a second? Could you give a brief summary of W3 schools versus Stack Overflow, the discussion we had Friday? When you're looking for information, what sites are most helpful?
Let me actually just search that, connect to MySQL.
So I think Brent's point is well taken, guys. Don't clutter up your brain with lots of information that you need to memorize. Just be able to find the information. You know what the right questions are to ask online.
You guys are of the age, I assume, that have seen SpongeBob, right? So I don't know if you remember the episode where Squidward was trying to compete with his rival and SpongeBob was supposed to be the waiter. And then they asked SpongeBob, "What's your name?" They can't find his name. He remembered so much about the restaurant business. They threw out his name for space. And this is the result. This can happen in programming too, okay? So you just need to know how to find the info and move between what you're doing. Unless you have like a photographic memory, this might be your brain if you try to remember too much.
Good. Well put, Brent.
All right, so with W3 Schools and Stack Overflow, the difference between them and what I like about them, you'll see they're actually two of the top results for that search that I mentioned. W3 School is kind of like curated lessons. It's very much so like textbook format where it gives you examples, things to try. I mean, the only difference between a textbook is it has an interactive part where you can see the code and test the code. But it's very much so lesson 1, 1.1, 2.1, whatever. Like it's all broken up, very easy to digest. Great if you're trying to learn something, but it doesn't get into specific use cases very frequently. So if you have a program you're writing, W3 Schools is great if you know exactly what you're looking for. You just reference in like, oh, I need to run a query. MySQL queries, W3 Schools, great. You look through it, you got your stuff. But if it's a unique problem and you're not sure what's going on, you're lost as a developer and you need help, but you're the only person on your team, like you're the only programmer on a project, Stack Overflow is actually a group of other, and actually let's open both of these to show you. So real quick, W3 Schools looks like this. It explains it. It gives you an example, a button to run example, another example, run example. You get to try it. You get to see how it works. You get to see the result. Very great, very digestible, very organized. Stack Overflow is when you're the developer who's like, I did everything I thought was right, but there's a problem and I need someone to help me troubleshoot. So you post your question, you give them an example, or you ask for help to get to a result and you don't know what to look up to find it. And then developers will answer your questions. They'll vote on the answers, like other people on the platform, and you'll see like a high number of upvotes and a green check mark usually near the answer that will best apply to you. It's very helpful, and you also get multiple people's input, different like variations of the solution and stuff like that, and it's just wonderful. I use these two examples of like for info all the time, daily, maybe even. So backing up a little bit, the actual place I found this happened to be the first link, which is neither.
Excuse me, Brent, again, may I interrupt? I
Oh,
don't
sure.
want to disrupt your flow because your flow is great. But what I really like about the concept of Stack Overflow, it's an emphasis on teamwork. And in my experience, if you want to do anything really special, you need to work with a team. Very rarely does something unusual get done by just one person. And the team spirit of Stack Overflow is great. Many times these programmers are working for companies that compete against each other really aggressively, but the programmers and the whole spirit of development is share your ideas so we can all get better quicker. And I think that spirit is something we should try to practice at Build It Yourself. Okay, Brent, sorry.
Oh, no, it's true. And actually, if you guys ever read up on Einstein, I think there was a time in history where like the borders between countries weren't too friendly and the physicists still helped each other too. It's very much so like an engineering, physicist, like any of like the knowledge-based industries tend to like not have boundaries, I think, and they just like progress forwards, kind of what I notice in life. It's a beautiful thing. So the first result is actually where I got this code, SiteGround. Now I have a benefit of being in web design for a long time. SiteGround is a good web hosting company, and usually web hosting companies post really relevant information and they do a small amount of it just to be found on Google. So I knew that this would be a good example, straight to the point, and I felt good clicking it, but most of the time I'll look for these. As you guys do more and more programming, you'll learn the other results you can trust, but these two are some of the best. So switching back over to here, let's see. Okay, so this is where we got this code, right, off of Google search. Step one is to connect to the database. So let's see, this section of code right here is the part where we connect. So we specify, let me zoom into a little bit, it's easier to see. So username, root, password blank. You guys would change those to whatever the web server is that you're uploading this to once you go to upload. Or if your local server is different, you change these. Then you specify the database. And the comment here, you can find this in PHPMy Admin. All that means is that off on the left side, you'll see a list of databases. So this is the name you want to grab, BIY. Well, at least in my example. From there, we need to actually connect to the database. And within that connection, there's one part that's not broken out into a variable in the example we ripped from the internet. This is host. So when you have a WAMP server running, localhost is your own computer. Like when you go to connect to localhost, your computer just says connect to yourself and pull the file from your server. So this might change to an IP address or something else depending on your configuration. So just be aware of that. And I have a comment that, you know, later on when we go to write our final code, we can move this up into a variable. But just for time's sake, we left it like this. So MySQLi, this is just a variable, equals new MySQLi. So this is making the connection, and it's basically just dumping in your credentials into a function that exists within PHP. So this is going to try and connect to the database. So with that, the next thing is to query the info. So basically, this is no different than logging into like a Facebook or a Gmail account, right? You go to the website, you enter in username and password. So host is like the website, username and password, and then you connect. In this case, we're specifying a database, but it's not so different than what you do as a human when you're on the internet. From here, we need to run a query. This query isn't going to display anything, but it's just storing the data we want into a variable. So we'll basically copy and paste our query from PHPMy Admin exactly as it shows up. And actually, I think this might be the same example where, oh, category like junk. Okay, so let's do this and swap out the query as an example. Localhost. I have this saved inside of a folder called BIY. I'll show you that too in a moment, but /BIY. This loads, now this is database output, and we have our results pop up. We'll explain the images and stuff shortly, but basically you can see that we have a set of data that gets looped through and it displays what we found. Over here, I'm going to change the data we're pulling using PHPMy Admin to generate my query. So I'm going to switch over to here. You know, let's look at our full data set real quick. And let's grab everything that is artist name Rodrigo. So we're going to go to search where artist name is like Rodrigo. And then we get 3 results. Again, you see this up here changes. This is our query. I keep clicking that today. So I'm going to right click and copy this line of text up here. And we're going to switch back over to our code. And inside the double quotes specifically, make sure you have the double quotes on both sides. We're going to paste this in. I'm going to save this. And you'll see that our data set now changes to just the Rodrigo results. If I change this back and I save it, it grabs the other results. So like basically that query is controlling the data pulled from the database. And it's getting stored over here. Now, I mentioned specifically in the double quotes, and the reason I want you to think about that is if we have an HTML tag like image, I'll just kind of do that. It ends with the caret, right? Starts with the caret, ends with the caret. If you're going to run a query or anything in PHP, like if you're going to display info, that's the echo command down here. There's other, this what I'm about to show you is true for other programming languages too. If you put a string inside of quotes, like text string of some sort, if you add another double quote, this breaks it. This opens and closes, like this opens and closes. So the third one is going to open it again, but then you have no close. You see all my stuff turns gray down below up until the next quotation. It messes everything up. But if I change this to a single quote, everything is fine. So very much so like opening and closing a tag, single quote and double quote, when you open and close, they have to match. And you can't just throw a double quote inside of 2 other double quotes. There's special ways to like escape a character and stuff. We'll deal with that down the road. But for now, just if you need to use a single quote, like if you're saying Rodrigo's like possessive, right? And you need a single quote, open and close with a double quote, make life easier, right? Or like John's, right? But now if you're gonna have someone make a quote, like in the text string, you know, you're gonna have 2 quotes, that's maybe where you'd want to use single quotes on the outside. When we get an example where we have to deal with it, like if we're having someone say a dialogue sentence and then we also have an apostrophe and that kind of stuff, we can Google how to escape the character. That just means we tell the program, ignore this double quote. It's usually like a backslash or something, but again, let's not go crazy there. So that's the logic of why you need the double quotes on the outside. It open and closes, query goes inside, and everything runs great when we copy and paste it in. Then you'll see in our result, we have database output here. So right here, you see database output. I could change this to artist cards. Save this, refresh this, changes just in the HTML like regular. So what's happening here is we have a double quote and double quote, a PHP command called echo, and a semicolon that closes the line. So echo allows you to just display, it's basically the output, right? It's what's going to get displayed on the page. You can mix in variables, you can do a bunch of cool stuff I'll show you in a moment, but the basic principle is you echo, then there's some information you want to display on the website, whether it's, excuse me, dynamic or static, that doesn't matter so much right now. And then when you finish the line of code, you have to put a semicolon. You'll notice that above, that ends the line. So without this, if I backspace this, everything below thinks it's still the same line, and that might create errors in the output.
Like
So
in
just
C++?
know when you finish, semicolon. Oh, go ahead.
And like in C++?
Yeah, I don't actually use C very much, but I know that in other languages, I know like Python, for instance, it's like the line break and the indent. And I know C, I think I did a little C# in one workshop with the kid, and I was Googling it the whole time, so I'm very bad at it. But yeah, if there's a semicolon at the end of every line, same thing. This is a common practice across all programming languages. So that's a great question. They will vary based on the language, but it's always like signify that you ended the line of code.
Brent, may I add a question here? What happens when you generate the echo command in PHP? When you use the echo command in PHP, it actually generates HTML that is sent to the browser. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So echo, the way echo, at least I see how it works, is that it will output kind of consecutively. There's a few other ways. I know like you could do like a return command, but I think return like terminates the rest of the code or something. Like it basically ends whatever you're doing. Like it is like the final result. I see it more in functions and stuff like that with PHP and WordPress. I don't really deal with it much, but echo generates the code. So this will literally get output at this point. And then until you have another echo, like when you echo other stuff, those get output as HTML. And as a really quick example, you'll see this has the bold tag, center tag, some text, and then we close those and do a double line break. If we go over here and we right click and inspect this, you'll see we have the bold tag, the center tag, right? The text in between, and we close the bold tag and we have 2 line breaks. So this is from the echo command that we just looked at, this section of code right here.
Great, great. The concept is that we're running PHP code on the server and we're running HTML, CSS on the client. Great. Brent, on the code there's an open bracket right here. And I don't see a closed bracket for this.
Okay, I see. If I scroll down a little bit, right here.
Oh, I see. Okay, so got it. Okay, so you open that bracket, you have to close it, and that, got it, like the quotation marks.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's kind of like a reoccurring thing you'll see in programming. The same thing as open and close in a tag, open and close in the quotes, open and close in brackets or parentheses. Essentially, if you open something, you probably have to close it somewhere, is the best way to think of it. And if you don't, you'll probably have a syntax error somewhere popping up on your site or something. Sometimes you get lucky and your error doesn't really create an issue. But then there's other times where it will just break your whole code. I had actually, I think I told this on the Friday class. That happened to me once. It was based on the version of PHP and MySQL. My code was good, but PHP had an updated version. And I think I was either using the new or old one on my laptop. And then the build it yourself server was a different version, the inverse. It was either older or newer than what I had. So when I uploaded my code, everything didn't work. And it was pretty terrifying. And it was because the syntax changed slightly. Like it was, the code I wrote could be broken up into multiple modules, like open, close. But on the new version, it had to be together. And I didn't know that. And I had a lot of trouble troubleshooting it for a while. So yeah, knowing the syntax of the language you're using is important, and the version of the language you're using is important. It's actually like, think about like Spanish and like any of the variations. Like I know in Spain versus Mexico versus Puerto Rico, and then other subsets of countries, right? You'll have variations in the language. They're similar, but they're different. And if you use the wrong syntax when you're talking to someone, you could totally misunderstand each other, right? At certain points. So it's not so different than spoken language. Just think about like English here versus England or something like that. There's variations in the language.
Great. Thanks, Brent.
You're welcome. All right, so this part, I like to compare loops to things in Scratch, because I know we've all done Scratch, and Scratch is a great way to learn programming. Once we have our data set from the query, right, we connect, we specify our data, then we're going to check if our data exists, if there are some results. And that's what this if statement's doing. If there is a result, where like basically we're setting result to the, once the query runs, we're setting the data into result. And then if result exists, if it's not empty or not null, I forget exactly, but if it has something in it is the simplest level to think here. Null, empty, and non-existent are three different things, and sometimes it matters to know what's going on with them. But for this case, let's keep it simple and just say, if we have some stuff that comes back, this won't be empty, and then we'll continue our code. Else, we just skip this whole if, from where this bracket starts, if there's no results returned, we just get down to here. If there are results, we do the stuff in between. So in Scratch, you have those if conditions, if variable time is greater than 10, then you can still do stuff. Else, say game over or something similar. And then we have our while, which is basically a repeat loop. So repeat X amount of times, think of it like that, or repeat until. So we'll repeat until, like, let's say we have 5 results, repeat 5 times, and then we do stuff. So in PHP, that kind of looks like this. While row equals, so what we're doing is we're setting a variable called row to the variable result, which we know our whole data set, our whole query lives inside of it. But then again, I Google stuff aggressively, so I won't pretend I know exactly what this means, but just using context clues. If we're gonna loop through for like basically like each record, this must just mean that it's pertaining to whichever record starts it, and then as it loops through, it goes to the next consecutive, is my assumption. So when I say that, I'm talking, this is referring to row 1. Then when it loops through and finishes, this is going to set this to row 2, row 3. Think of it like that. It's just kind of looping through each record. I'm sure there's a fancier way to explain that I don't have, but we could Google it if you want to know it. So from here, what we can do, right, is each of the columns inside of this database table has a name. Row is actually storing all the columns in that row. So think of it as each of these are comma separated. You could refer to it as column 1 or as unique ID. You can refer to it as artist name, or, well, this is probably column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3. So whenever you're using what they call like a key to like find a value within an array, it starts at 0, I believe, in PHP. But we're just going to use the actual name, because as a human, I like seeing this a lot more than seeing like 0 or 1 or something like that. I prefer this method just for the sake of understanding the code at a glance. But basically, we'll set a variable artist. And I didn't mention this before, but all variables start with a $sign. If you're going to assign a value, like in Scratch, right? Variable health, set variable health to 100 at the start of the game, right? So this is initializing the variable or setting a value to the variable. Down below here, we're going to make a variable for each of the columns we want to get. We're telling it to look inside of row and pull the data that exists in whichever column we want. And we pull that out and we set it to a smaller variable that this works, but I'd rather see this in my code below. And this works a little easier than seeing a number, but if you're trying to make your code leaner, you could use the numbers and shrink the amount of characters. But so down below, now that we pulled our info, we assigned it to variables, each column that we want to pull data from. We use those echo commands again that we saw above. And just like John said, this is just basically outputting the HTML that actually displays in the file that you get back as the visitor. So echo artist, that is going to say whatever value existed, in here, row 1, loop through, grab the next one, loop through, grab the next one. We grab category, and then we output an image. Now you'll notice there's a period, and then I have the quotes that open and close. We know we can put text strings inside of quotes now, right? Or basic HTML, like raw, static HTML. So period joins 2 things. It can join a variable in text. It can join 2 separated things of text, and so on. And what this is doing is this will become text and then join it with a line break in HTML. We close that line. Then we echo category, join it with a line break, close that line. And then this one, same thing, right? We don't have to include a whole HTML tag. It can be partial. So what we did was we have an image tag, but where we have the image src, the source or the path, we break the string. We dynamically inject the string saved in the database value, right in the row. Then we go back to our text string. So this single quote is how, like if I wrote this out in regular HTML, this is dynamic, but we could just say like images / pic.jpg. And that's effectively, this is storing that value. You'll see in the database here, images pic.jpg. So that's why we have a broken image tag, and we're using dynamic database value to actually output the path. We loop through for each value, and then after that, results free, I'm pretty sure just like clears the variable or dumps out the data from the variable. So this while, opens and closes, and this is the loop. This if checks if there's data, and then at the end it, then we. Last thing to mention, I guess here is that we have a close tag that looks funny as a question mark, and up here we have an open tag with a question mark. This opens and closes PHP code. I forgot to mention a .php file. You could literally copy your source code from your personal site, paste it into a new document, and save it as .php. It will work the exact same because a PHP file can handle static HTML. But when you declare this, the question mark PHP, you're opening up PHP code specifically. And this is when you can do your server-side stuff. And that gets us, these kind of results. Now, I was lazy and I didn't actually input images. So the last thing I think I have to show you guys is inside of WAMP, in a www folder. Inside of the DIY folder, we have images. This is our index.php file. You'll see this matches the file path of the website. So if I switch over here, localhost is my www folder. Just like when you upload something to Invention-Universe for like intern, your personal website, or the build it yourself server, you have like the public HTML folder or the www folder. They could vary based on the server, but you basically have your main root directory. Then inside of that, you have your subdirectories, BIY. That's the BIY folder. Images, we have BIY.png. So I'm going to go inside of here, just double click here. You don't need the slash before image. That was just me typing too fast. And then here we'll have, whoops, it auto finished. So let's do BIY.png here. Now, if I refresh this, the image path is working. For our Vigo category junk, we updated one of the images, and you'll see that actually shows up. So that's a lot of information to take in. It's just connect to data. You have your database with info, connect to database, grab your data from a query, output it and mix with HTML and dynamic code. Boom, the user gets something like this. Is the shortest way to think of it. And when you make this, you want to build your whole front end in HTML and CSS first. So that way you're not doing too many things at once. So don't get overwhelmed. Then we'll add the database connection, and then we'll dynamically replace the static, image path or artist name. We'll have the HTML file as a template, and then we'll inject the values. We'll make it dynamic after. And then the back end and front end will combine, and then you have your final, app, or your beta app maybe.
Fantastic, Brent.
Any questions?
Tremendous. I'm going to stop the recording and then start it again for the questions so we can separate the video.